What's going on, everybody? What's going on? It's your boy, R.W. Coolins, coming to you live and direct this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Let's get this show started. Let's get it started. Let's go. Give me them horns. Get up, get up, get up. It's Saturday morning, y'all. Y'all know what time it is. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's your boy, R.W. Coolins, with the Speak on It show. As we come to you every Saturday morning, but first and foremost, giving honor to God who allows me to come at you in this manner on a weekly basis. Got a good show for you this morning, But before we get started, let's go ahead and get these formalities out of the way. All right. So it's rwcoolins.com. That's where you can go. That's the website. You can follow me on the website. Also, YouTube, Facebook. Right now, we're broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube. We're trying something new. So we're on Facebook and YouTube live this morning. And you can go follow me on YouTube, RW Coolins. Spreaker.com is where you can go back and listen to the show's audio only. Spreaker.com, search RW Coolins there, and you can listen to the show whenever you feel like it. You know what I'm saying? You can download all the shows are posted there after the fact, and you can get them all there. Facebook.com, RW Coolins. Just know this, RW Coolins everywhere, RW Coolins everywhere, all social media everywhere. That's where you can find me. That's where we're going to be. Also, call-in number. Phone lines are open. See it streaming at the bottom, 844-904-2665. That's 844-904-2665. Make sure if you got to, no matter what the situation is, let your voice be heard. If you got something to say, all I require is say what you mean what you say. If you decide to call in and make a comment about any topic that we're going to discuss this morning. So it's been a long week for some, a little longer for others. You know how it goes when you're in the work week and everything. Still got the COVID-19 going on. Be safe, be safe, be safe. Wear your mask. You know, if you're not wearing it for yourself, wear it for others. Do the right thing by those folks that are around you. You got some people out here who have preconditions that you can affect by being, even though you may be asymptomatic and have the coronavirus, you may be passing it on to somebody unknowingly, and that could affect them and their families for the rest of their lives. Be smart. And you know what? Look out for each other. Wear your mask, wear your mask, wear your mask. Now I'm gonna come to you this morning. I got some. It's going to seem gloomy in the beginning, but there's a method to my madness that I'm going to talk about this morning. Anybody in the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, we lost an icon. And we'll get into the other ones, but this one is a local icon, Patrick Ellis. Patrick Ellis from WHUR 96.3 FM back in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. He was the morning gospel show host, and anybody who was raised in a household of, God-fearing parents, you probably heard his voice when you were a young kid, you recognized the voice, didn't know who he was, didn't know what was going, coming through the radio. But as years went by, as we became older, we learned to appreciate Patrick Ellis for what he provided to the community on the gospel side of the house. We've lost an icon, y'all, for all those back in the DMV area. Let me take my glasses off real quick and look at something. He hosted the Sunday morning gospel show for 4 decades. 4 decades he was with WHER hosting that show. His show every Sunday morning, 5 hours long. Think about that now. Let's analyze it. 5 hours long. He's bringing you gospel music. He's bringing you commentary within the community. And he's also giving birthday shout outs and giving you an update on people in the community that have made calls in about someone that may have passed away and everything. He touched on everything. He was the community every Sunday morning. Also, he started as a student volunteer in 1971 at the radio station, a student volunteer. And what I remember him for, and I wish, and I'm going to say that, I wish that R.W. Coolins just had one small percentage of that baritone voice. That baritone voice. Anybody that doesn't know who Patrick Ellis is, I think you can probably go to WHUR and they may have, shows that are pre-broadcast that you can listen to, but his voice was so smooth, so silky, and he presented every Sunday morning the gospel show where you knew his faith was grounded, and he also just had that voice that made you want to tune in every week. Prayers and condolences out to the family of Patrick Ellis and the WHUR family and everyone in the DMV. We've lost an icon. All right, today. Now, y'all heard me talk about that icon. I got some other icons that I'm going to talk about. But today, the topic is going to be geared around voting. The topic is going to be geared around voting. And, the thing about this is we lost two other icons this week in the African-American community. We lost Representative John Lewis at 80 and Reverend C.T. Vivian. That's Cordy Tyndall Vivian. We lost him at 95 of natural causes. Representative John Lewis, we lost to pancreatic cancer. We know he was fighting the battle. He announced it not too long ago. But I'm going to touch on some things about, both of these icons, pillars in the community, passed away this week. But I'm going to give you everyone knows a lot of the background, but I'm going to go into this and I'm going to talk about them and what they've done. And then some of the voting things that are going on now that I want to touch on, because we got an election coming up on November 3rd. And I think as much as we hear the poll numbers and everything like that, I think we need to hear the history of how we got to where we can vote. Those people that stood on the front lines to fight for our right to vote, and to get you to understand that going out there and voting, is not something we should take lightly. So let me get into this. Representative John Lewis and Reverend CT, I'm gonna use his initials because that's what he went by, CT Vivian. These were two civil rights icons. Both men worked alongside of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s. Both of these pillars withstood beatings during their protests. John Lewis, as we all know, and if some of you that don't know, let me refresh your memory, he suffered a fractured skull on a day they called Bloody Sunday. And Bloody Sunday was when they were at they did the march, Voting Rights Act march across the Edward Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. C.T. Vivian was beaten until the blood dripped down his chin by a sheriff when they were trying to get people pushing register to vote. And he said, we will register to vote as citizens, is what C.T. Vivian stood on. And he was beaten by a sheriff. Now let's analyze this. Now he was beaten until the blood was dripping down his chin by a sheriff, a law enforcement officer. Let me say that one more time because I want y'all to correlate this that went on back then and what's going on now. He was beaten until blood dripped down his chin by a law enforcement officer in a sheriff position, all about marching for voting rights for African-American folk. Let that marinate in your mind juices. His beating was in Selma, Alabama. So a lot of these things happened in Selma because that's where a lot of the marches took place and everything. Both of these icons in our community received the Medal of Freedom while Barack Obama was in office. John Lewis received his in 2011, C.T. Vivian in 2013. We lost two icons, and the reason I bring this up today, one's 80 and one's 95. And what brought this to me today is when you think about these two icons, you think about everything they've done for our community, for the United States of America. Let's just put it as a whole. And what they did was they stood up for the Voting Rights Act for the rights of people of color, and it trickled down to the rights of people no matter what color. They fought for the rights of everyone to be able to practice what rights they had on this United States soil. So we want to give them their flowers. I know we gave a lot of them while they were here, but I want to give them their flowers today. We've lost icons, y'all. And the reason I bring this up also is to tell you this. When you talk about icons, I'm 54 now. And as I mentioned, one was 80. John Lewis was 80. C.T. Vivian, 95. I'm 54. I didn't see all the struggles and things they went through to get us to where we are today. But what I will tell you is a lot of those who stood on the front lines for us to be able to have the freedoms, just take them for granted, me being on this microphone today. These people fought the good fight for us, and they're leaving us one by one. All the history, all the things they stood for, everything that those who fought for our rights to do the things that we do today, that we take for granted at times. I know I do, as well as you. But the things we take for granted, these people stood on the front lines to give us the right to do the things, to walk freely down the street. And when you talk about the protests now, compared to the protests then, you don't see them sicking dogs and water hoses and all those. These two icons and those like them back in the day did these things, fought these things, and did everything that they could to give us the rights to be able to, practice our freedoms as we see them today. Rest in honor, John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, and also, let's not forget, Patrick Ellis of WHUR, a pillar of the community back in the DMV. Being 54 and with this election coming up and everything that's going on in the world, and with the coronavirus and the protests about George Floyd and all the senseless killings at the hands of law enforcement that we're out here protesting and everything like that, it really opens your eyes to the fact that we've come a long way, but we still got a long way to go. We still have a long way to go. So being that I've talked about those three, because I'm sure Patrick Ellis was involved in some of those things as well, let me give y'all a little bit about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Let's give a little history lesson, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give you something after this that's really gonna open your eyes to how the system, and we always talk about the system, but how the system can be manipulated to prevent those who have the right to vote or anything, can be manipulated to take that right away from you with loopholes that they look for on a consistent basis. The Voting Rights Act of 1965. Lyndon B. Johnson signed it into law in 1965. It was aimed to overcome legal barriers at state and local levels that were preventing African Americans from exercising their right to vote as guaranteed under the 15th Amendment. Let me say that again. Under the 15th Amendment, you had the right to vote. However, here's where the water gets muddy back in the day. The 15th Amendment was ratified in 1870 after the Civil War. So it gave, in there, it mentioned, and I wish I would have wrote it down exactly. Well, here it says, when it was ratified, excuse me, when it was ratified in 1870, it prohibited states from denying male citizens the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Let me read that one more time. It prohibited states from denying male citizens the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now, the reason I read that again is it doesn't mention women. It mentions male. You see? So you have to think about it this way. All the marchers, Martin Luther King, the civil rights icons, all those people that were marching were not only marching for the right to vote for African Americans, they were also marching for the right for women to be able to vote as well. I think that gets lost in the shuffle. So I just wanted to bring that up. That it's bigger than a lot of times that we hear. It's bigger than what we think. In the 15th Amendment, it did not mention women. It said male citizens. Male citizens. Keep that in mind. There were many practices used to prevent African Americans from voting for decades. They were beaten, hung, turned away at the polls. Anything you can think about to prevent you from getting to a destination you're trying to get to and practice your right was done to African American males at that time. Other tactics that were used, and this kind of jumped out at me, they were telling them they were at the wrong polling place. Sound familiar? They were at the wrong polling place. They had the wrong date, the wrong time. They were in the wrong location. They weren't supposed to vote at that place. And then they even had a part in there that jumped out at me. It says that African Americans were turned away from voting because they possessed insufficient literacy skills or filled out the application wrong. Insufficient literacy skills, which they based it on because when you're coming out of slavery, when you're coming out of that time period, a lot of the slaves couldn't read, didn't have the literary skills, but these were the obstacles that they put in the way for these African Americans to practice their right to vote. This is what the Voting Rights Act, of 1965 was done and written into law to stop. And they also made the African Americans take a literacy test. Think about that for a minute. They made you take a literacy test in order to vote. Okay, I think you thought about that long enough. Everything that I've just read is the reason why the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was put into place. It also, solidifies the reason why Dr. Martin Luther King and all those civil rights icons were marching for the right to vote, because their rights were being hindered, although it was mentioned in the 15th Amendment that they had a right as male citizens and couldn't be discriminated upon race, color, or previous condition of servitude. And I want you to remember that previous condition of servitude, because my next segment is going to touch on that. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965, I think sometimes we take this for granted when we hear the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and think it's something that is just, a right. It is a right. But I think sometimes we look at it and we don't look at it in the form of what it actually is. There's a lot of people that we all know that choose not to vote. I'm not here to tell you to. I'm not here to tell you not to. But what you need to do, I would say, go back and read your history on what it took for people of color to get the right to vote, women that had no right to vote. All these things are inclusive, and there's a lot of times we just stick the Voting Rights Act on the African American, but it also entailed the rights for women to vote. November 3rd, get out and vote. November 3rd, get out and vote. November 3rd, get out and vote. Now, the reason I brought this up, because this is what I started with. I started with, when I was doing my research and everything, I started with Representative John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, and then Patrick Ellison, talking about them. But as I was doing my research about what they marched about, and then I wanted to bring in the Voting Rights Act. But this article is the one I seen initially that made me go back to it all. Voting in Florida. I don't know if a lot of you've seen it, but if you haven't, I'm going to give it to you. 844, before we get into that, 844-904-2665. That's 888-665. Call in, make a comment. You know, no matter what the situation is, let your voice be heard. Also, if you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, if you make a comment, you can put a comment there and I will post it on. I have the capability to post your comment on the screen so everybody can see what your input may be. If you don't want your voice on, at least let your words be seen on the screen. I got the capability to do that. All right. So voting in Florida. Let's get into this real quick. So Florida's always been one of those things. We had the hanging chads down there with the Bush and Gore thing. But voting in Florida, this is something that I think a lot of people need to pay attention to because we always talk about voter suppression. And this right here is voter suppression for me to the 10th power. Here it goes. The Supreme Court all but guaranteed that nearly 1 million, let me give you that number again, nearly 1 million Floridians will be unable to vote in the 2020 election. Why? Due to unpaid court debts, it's basically they're imposing a poll tax, which is illegal. But they got a loophole there in how they're doing it. So anybody that's been to jail, ex-felons, have a right to vote under state and federal constitutions. You remember they came back and said ex-felons can vote now. They're doing this. But Florida came up and said, you know what? We don't want them voting. We're going to try to do everything we can to suppress their vote and do whatever we can. So they came up with this thing where they're saying now they got to pay unpaid court and debt fees. Court fees and debts. In 2018, residents, a constitutional amendment that abolished a Jim Crow law permanently disenfranchising convicted felons. In 2018, the residents of Florida took a vote about allowing ex-felons to vote. And it was done as a constitutional amendment that abolished a Jim Crow law, permanently disenfranchising convicted felons. I can't even read my writing right now. So what the GOP lawmakers did is they sabotaged the amendment. They passed a law that formerly incarcerated people have to pay all fines and fees associated with their sentence. All formerly incarcerated people have to pay all fines and fees associated with their sentence. So if you were sentenced in Florida and you went to spend some time in jail, or you were convicted of something, or anything like that, there's fees that they apply to your sentencing. Florida now imposes numerous fees on defendants to fund its criminal justice system. So they use these fees to put back into the criminal justice system that the ex-felons, people that have served time, have to pay after they get out of jail or whatever time they serve. There's a lot of fees, and Florida has a whole lot of fees. I looked at them. It's a whole lot of fees. What they did was the GOP went to the Supreme Court to say that we're not going to not allow them to vote, but they can't vote unless they pay these fees first. So in the big scope of things, I've served my time. I've done everything that I was required to do at the time for the crime I committed. I'm now out. They passed a law that said me, even being as an ex-felon, I'm allowed to vote. But then Florida puts a twist on it and says, wait a minute, that's over 1 million people. Oh no, we got to do something about this. So what Florida did, they went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, because, well, first of all, they enacted the thing about paying the fees and people went uproar. So they went to court about it. So then they got overruled and the lower court said, you can't do that. It's kind of a poll tax, as I mentioned before. So the GOP went to the Supreme Court with it and said, it's not a poll tax. These are fees that we charge ex-felons, convicts, whoever you want to call, when they get out, that they have to pay these court fees and everything. So we're not putting a poll tax on them, but until they can't vote until they pay these fees. Think about that for a minute. Over 1 million people, over 1 million people. Poll taxes in 1964, they were found to be illegal in federal elections. In 1966, they were banned in state elections. Poll taxes are illegal across the board. So what do? You find a loophole. Okay, I'm not going to call it a poll tax. I'm going to call it court fees, service fees. And that's what they did. That's what they're doing in Florida. So right now, the Supreme Court sided with the GOP. And right now in Florida, you have nearly 1 million people who will not be able to vote in this upcoming election because they're going to make them pay these fines and fees. And the fines and fees are not small amounts, depending on who you are, what you did, and everything like that. But it affects more than we probably think about. They said nearly 1 million. Well, that'll tell you something right there. So you think about it. You take 1 million people out of one state and take away their vote. What do you come up with? Does it sway the vote? Hell yeah, it sways the vote. It sways a whole lot of things when you take 1 million people out of the equation of the vote and the voting process. Let that marinate, y'all. Let that marinate. My thing is this. When I read this article, I understand, where at one time they said, ex-felons, if you serve time, you can't vote. I have a problem with that, and I'm going to tell you why. If we all think back, let's think back in history when we were younger. Well, I was younger anyway. I remember when going to jail, being sentenced to a jail sentence or, serving time, let's just say that, was supposed to be a rehabilitative tool. Going to jail was supposed to rehabilitate the actions that got you in jail. It was called, listen to what it is now, a correctional facility. Correctional facility, which means while you're there, back in the day, they did things to correct the behavior that caused you to be there. We don't do that anymore. Back in the day when you went to prison, jail, they had, trades that you could learn. You could get a GED. You came out of, most people, I'm just going to say most people, came out of jail or prison different than they went in because now they had a trade. And the main reason they were coming out with a trade was because the system said that what they were doing was making them, when they came out, to be a contributor to society, an upstanding citizen to society in spite of what they did in their past. That's not what prison and jail is about anymore. Prison and jail nowadays is a death sentence. And I don't mean death in the aspect of dying. I mean death in the fact that when you come out of jail, it's hard to find a job. People see felon, ex-felon, anything on there, and you're not going to be able to get a job. What kind of job can you get? Who's going to give you an opportunity? Who's going to give you a door to come into to show that you've been rehabilitated? Few and far in between. But then we have where you come out and they've taken your freedoms away as far as being able to find a job or supply for or support your family or whatever you want to think about. And then one of the smallest things that we may take for granted, they don't even want you, they won't allow you to do that now unless you pay fees. And if it's happening in Florida, trust and believe me, it's going to happen in more states in time. It's a rolling process. It's a rolling process. It's a rolling process. Taking away a person's right to vote, they have no voice. They have no voice in what goes on in the elections, the laws that are passed that pertain to them. They had no voice in, but they have to follow it. They have to follow the laws, but they had no choice in who is making the laws. Think about that. That's why I always tell people, I'm not telling you who to vote for, who not to vote for. I would never tell you anything like that. But what I do tell you is vote. Because there's been many people, many people throughout our history that have died fighting for your right to vote. It's not hard, y'all. And they're going to do everything in your power. As you've seen, they had to, back in the day, they told them the literacy test and all these different things. There are so many obstacles that they will put in your way to stop you from being able to voice how you feel about a candidate at the polls, because they want to sway it their way rather than the way of the people. Get out and vote, y'all. Get out and vote. And for those people in Florida, keep fighting. keep fighting the good fight, because in my opinion, once you serve your time is served. We as society tend to hold those people accountable, even though they've served the time that they were sentenced to serve. We hold them accountable for anything they've done in their past, and we don't give them the benefit of the doubt that they become a better citizen than they were before they went in, although they've served their time. Next, you know what it is. Mind, body, and soul, baby. If your mind's right, your body's right, and your soul's right, and all three are on the same accord, then if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Let me just put it like that. Mind, body, and soul segment, y'all. And what I do in this segment is I come up with a quote, or I find a quote. Sometimes I'll create one. But I find a quote, and then I elaborate on it, because I think we all have to look at ourselves internally in order to show who we are and how we carry ourselves and what we believe outwardly towards other folks. Mind, body, and soul. Here we go. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Let me read that one more time. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. That's a quote from Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Now, when I read that quote, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. You can look at many things in your life, things that you may have done wrong, things you may have done to somebody, and anything you can think about. And that thing that you affected one has a trickle down effect, as they say. And I'll put it in the context of this. If you, well, we can just take it right now. If you choose not to wear a mask right now, and you have the coronavirus and you did not know, or you do not know you have it, but you choose not to wear a mask, your one decision is affecting everyone that you come in contact with. It's no different than if you go out here and commit a crime. Anything you do that affects one affects everybody. If you get sentenced to go to prison, there's a whole line of people that were affected in your family because now you're no longer there. If you kill somebody, hurt somebody, it affects not only your side of the family, but everyone on the side of the family of who you hurt or anything you did to somebody. And I'm going to simplify it like this. Sometimes we, as people, think we're doing what's right for us. And that's one of the things we always say, I'm going to do what's right for me. I'm going to do what's right for me. But a lot of times what we don't look at is the impact of, even though it's right for me, what is it doing to everyone around me? How is it indirectly affecting all those other folks that I may come in contact with? Because what we find out sometimes in life is we become selfish with who we are. We become selfish about what we want out of life and forget everybody else. As long as I'm getting what I want, that's all that matters. But the after effects of that is indirectly, it affects everyone who you come in contact with, whether it's your family, your friends, your coworkers, anybody can be affected when one decision that you make that it directly affects you, that you think is good for you, may not be good for the masses. Now, I'm not telling anybody out there to not be selfish about what you want in life, what you want to do in life. But I think you also need to take into account of how it affects other folks that are in your life when you make these decisions. Sometimes we sit back sometimes, and because things haven't gone the way we wanted in life, or we haven't gotten the things that we want, when we see that opportunity to take advantage of those things that we truly want, or that you've been craving for, or something, anything, what we do is we forget about everyone else. All we remember is what I want. And though it's going to appease you directly, it could affect someone negatively indirectly. That's the mind, body, and soul segment for today. Think about your choices. Think about your decisions. And at the end of the day, make sure that what you think is great for you may not be great for everybody else. We're coming to the end of the show, but what I wanted to say to you today, as I mentioned in the beginning, we lost 3 icons within our community. It really made me reflect on the people in my life the elders in our life, people we've lost along the way in our travels. And I did a Just Coolins podcast the other day called Ride the Bike, Ride That Bike. And it holds true to what we're talking about today. We talk about the voting and everything like that, but in that message of voting, I will tell you this. When we talk about what I talked about the other day and Ride That Bike, we don't know the time or the hour. We don't know the day. We don't know what may become of our health or anything like that to cause our demise. But in the time you have on this earth, it's all about somehow, some way, making an impact. And when I say making an impact, it doesn't have to be something that is very large. It could be the smallest impact, whether you're impacting your children as a part of your legacy, or you're impacting people that you come in contact with one way or another. After you become a certain age, or you get to a certain point in your life where you're willing to and you want to give back to others, those things that you thought were important, they're still important, but they're not at the forefront of importance. Find a niche, find your purpose, find your reason to go out in this world every day and make an impact on somebody in some way. Because it goes back to what Martin Luther King Jr. said. If it affects one directly, it affects others indirectly. One conversation, one smile, one greeting, one gesture can make a difference in somebody's life. It's that simple. We make it more complicated than it needs to be. You know, I used the theory back in the day, the KISS theory. Keep it simple, stupid. KISS. Keep it simple. And I say stupid, but you could use the KISS theory. KIS. Keep it simple. But at the end of the day, take the time, evaluate yourself, find out, search yourself, ask God, what is my purpose? What should I be doing? And what am I doing to impact the people around me, the people I may not know? What am I doing to impact the world before I leave here and get called home to be with the man upstairs? It's that simple, y'all. Keep it simple. Don't make it more complicated than it really is. I'm your boy, R.W. Coolins. As I always say, before I sign off, love yourself, love one another, keep your head up, and most definitely, keep your faith in God. I'm your boy. Make sure you check me out on the radio, Spreaker.com. Go there. Also, YouTube, Facebook. I appreciate all your support. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here this morning with me. I appreciate you. Keep supporting. Go like, follow, do all the things on social media that you need to do. Let's get this thing rolling. I'm your boy, R.W. Coolins. Love yourself, love one another. Keep your head up, most definitely. Keep your faith in God. Holla at your boy. I'm out. Peace. Enjoy your Saturday.